So a few years ago, I made it my goal to find my dream XC race bike. I started out with the Polygon Syncline C3 and upgraded that bike into a beast of a bike. The next year, I moved over to the Team Marin 2, adding carbon wheels from Hunt and a SRAM Axis wireless shifting setup. This is by far one of the most fun and fastest hardtail XC bikes I have ever been on. Now, in the midst of training for my yearly 50-mile XC bike race, I got the urge to upgrade to a short travel, full suspension XC bike. And this year, I've become familiar with a brand new to the United States, Superior Bikes. These are now sold at Bikes Online, and I have rode the XP919, their budget hardtail, and it definitely surprised me. But I also rode the EXF 9039B Trail e-bike. This bike definitely feels like it's made by an XC company. But searching Bikes Online website, I ran across the Team 29 XF Issue R. And my God, this thing had me drooling. XC bikes are just so good looking in my eyes. And this bike, with its candy red clear coat over carbon weave, was just absolutely stunning. I found myself looking at this bike online several times a week, just dreaming, until one day I decided to stop looking and stop dreaming and decided to buy it. So I reached out to my friends over at Bikes Online and said, hey, I want to buy this bike for my personal use. And they asked me if I could make some content on it. And of course, I was like, absolutely. So over the next 3 months, I'm going to be testing out this bike and making several videos on it, including a video where I'm actually going to be racing this bike on my yearly 50-mile race, the BT Epic. At the end of all this, if I like this bike, I'll buy it and call it mine. During this time, I'm going to also be using my Polygon T9 and the Superior EXF 9039B to train for the BT Epic race. With these three bikes, I should be able to gain the skills and the strength to push me to the finish line. So let's go ahead and talk about what makes the Issue R so special. But first, I want to talk about the price and get that out of the way. This bike is definitely not cheap. But when you compare it to the competition, it comes in at such a good price, it's kind of unbelievable. The full retail on Bikes Online is $5,999, but the current sale price for this is $4,799. That's $1,200 off. But if you want the same frame with slightly lower spec parts, you might take a look at the other model right below it, the Issue, for $3,999. But this model, the Issue R, comes equipped with a load of goodies. Let's start with the basics. This is a 110mm up front and a 100mm in-back full suspension. Equipped with DT Swiss for both front and back, the F232 is your front suspension and the R232 is your rear suspension. These are connected to a remote lockout system that sits on your bars, allowing you to change the suspension in 3 ways with a flick of your finger. The frame is an all-high modular carbon that gives you a stiff but forgiving ride. Superior was actually able to make this frame with enough room to fit 2 bottle cages. This is pretty rare on a short travel XC bike. Now, here are some of the geo numbers for the frame, but to hit some highlights, you get an XC style 68-degree head tube angle and a 74.7 seat tube angle. Chainstays come in at 428mm, and the overall length of this bike comes in right around 1,149mm. Now, I'm going to be comparing this bike to my Team Marin 2 in a later video, but those are the numbers for now. Let's drop down and take a look at the drivetrain. This is an all-mechanical setup using the Shimano XTR group set. So you're going to get an XTR 12-speed shifter, rear derailleur, and cassette. Now it does come with an XT chain and a Raceface Next SL 34-tooth carbon crankset. They also chose to go with the XTR brake set with 160mm rotors both front and back and 2-piston XTR calipers. The wheel set on this is a DT Swiss XRC 1501 spline carbon 29er setup. These are incredibly light, coming in at just over 1,200 grams and are tubeless ready, and they even come with the valves. Now those wheels are wrapped with a Schwalbe Racing Ray 2.25 Super Race up front and a Schwalbe Racing Rao 2.25 Super Race in the back. As a side note, I was super leery about a 2.25 setup. Now taking a look at the cockpit, it has a 1 race carbon handlebar that is 760mm wide. That connects up to an alloy 1 race stem with 1 race lock-on grips. Now the dropper post is kind of special. It's a Crank Brothers Highline 11 150mm travel dropper post. This is a super light dropper that has a carbon fiber post. This is something that I haven't ever seen until now, and it looks super impressive. We're just gonna have to see if this thing has any longevity in it. And lastly, connecting to that dropper is a Physique Terra Argo X3 seat. All this coming in after going tubeless, adding Shimano's most basic SPD pedals and a computer mount. The weight of this bike came in at only 23.96 pounds. Lifting this bike up feels absolutely crazy. In fact, 2 of my riding buddies, the first time they lifted this, both of them said independently, wow, and it's a full suspension. This thing is super light. Now, I took my time setting this bike up before I even threw a leg over it. I wanted to make sure it was absolutely perfect. I set up the tubeless, shortened one of the cables, and added some ride wrap. I picked up the Ride Wrap Essentials kit, which was only 35 bucks, and it really wasn't all that hard to install. I did have some moments that I thought I really messed it up, but it turned out great in the end. After fully setting this bike up, I had to wonder, did I hype this bike up in my mind? Will it be everything that I want it to be? Now, I have a local trail that is absolutely perfect for testing out XC bikes. Bellows Lake, located in Springfield, Missouri, is a trail system that has smooth flowing single track with some climbs, some switchbacks, and a few technical sections. All in all, this trail system is meant for speed, and that's exactly what the Issue R is designed for. My first ride on this bike wasn't super long, coming in at around 14.5 miles. Now, from the first few feet on the trail, I could tell this bike has one thing in mind, and that is accelerating like it was shot out of a cannon. Snappy is the very first word that hit me when riding this bike. Feeling how snappy this bike was, I was a little bit worried that it would be twitchy on the corners, but I was totally wrong for thinking that. This bike felt not only fast, it felt smooth. The DT Swiss suspension was super impressive. I felt like I nailed the suspension setup on the rear shock, and the front fork was super close. I think I could use a PSI or 2 less on the fork, and it would be dialed in. But overall, the 110, 100mm travel felt like it had way more travel than it actually was. Now the bike shifts lightning fast and handles under load shifting better than any other drivetrain that I've ever used, including the SRAM Axis setup that I have on my Marin. The XTR brakes were great, but I did feel like I need to adjust the lever pull just a little bit further out from my grips. Now I did test the dropper post just for fun because this trail doesn't require a dropper post at all, and the dropper post was smooth and responsive just like I would expect it to be. One of the things that I found to be my favorite on this bike was actually the suspension lockout. Having full open, drive mode, and lockout was really fun to experience. The drive mode stiffens up your suspension in a very noticeable way, and the lockout is rock solid. You couldn't move the suspension at all in the lockout mode, but I have a feeling if you hit something really big, it'd probably move. Now, the carbon wheels felt every bit as good as my Hunt proven wheels. The hub sound was really nice. It was loud, but not overbearingly loud. Now, this could just be me being excited about the bike, but it absolutely rode like a dream. I will admit, I wasn't actually looking forward to riding this bike after getting it all set up. And this is mainly because I built this up in my head that this bike was gonna be so good, and if it wasn't good, I would have been so disappointed. But after all, that worry was all for naught. My first ride was so good, and I mean so good. Now, one last thing I'll talk about on this bike before I go out in my garage and just stare at this thing until I get to ride it again. The frame on this bike is not UDH. It does not have a universal derailleur hanger. They do have models, but they're significantly higher, and Bikes Online is not currently selling those models. So if you get one and you want to go with, say, a wireless setup, you won't be able to go with a T-type drivetrain. So SRAM transmission is not an option on this particular bike, but all of that is for a future video. If you guys want to learn more about this bike, I have some links down below. And if you choose to buy one or buy any bike from Bikes Online, I would really appreciate it if you used my links. These links are affiliated. It does help out this channel at absolutely zero cost to you. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of my experiences with this killer bike. And also follow me on IG. I'm doing some daily stories on my training status, and I think it's kind of fun. Now hit that like button and get out there and ride your bikes.